No matter how hard we try to weave in loose ends, if the yarn is slippery, the tails could pop out of their hiding spots right after we wash the project. And suddenly our once impeccable hat, scarf, or a sweater gets that kind of a distressed look, and that's not something we planned for, and it's not something we like. So what do we do when the tails get out and ruin the look of the project? Well, we fix it. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you a fairly simple way to make sure the tails never sneak out of their hiding spots again. Here's how this issue usually looks. So the tails get out and you can see that they puff up right here where they are not supposed to be, and often they even come to the right side of the work, like the tails right here on my swatch. Sometimes they split and half of the tail is on the right side of the work and the other half is on the wrong side of the work. So there are different variations. It all depends on how slippery the yarn is and how well the tails were secured in the first place. But that's what we get eventually if we are not careful, right? So what do we do now? To fix those tails, we would need a sharp sewing needle, like a real, not the wool needle, an actual sewing needle, the same that we use to attach, say, buttons or something, right? Then we would need a thread, a sewing thread, a really fine one, in a similar color as the work, so it's not visible. If you have a leftover yarn that you used for this project, then you can simply split the yarn to get one of the plies. That's what I did right here. And the color should be the same, of course, but because it's a demonstration, I will be using a contrasting color yarn. So that's what I have. Well, it's a thread actually. It's one ply of this same yarn, just in a different color. And if the tails are sticking out on the right side of the work, we would need to transfer them to the wrong side of the work first. If the fabric is loose, then you can do it with your fingers, kind of push it through and then catch it here and pull it out. But if the fabric is dense, then we would need a crochet hook. And here's how we transfer the tails to the wrong side of the work. Insert the crochet hook at the spot where the tail is supposed to be, so where it comes out actually, and this, like if I twist the tail, I see this spot over here, so I'm going right in there with my crochet hook. And then pick up the yarn, no matter which way you use, because the tail is probably short, and however you can grab it is good. So don't really get obsessed about the way how it's, you know, wrapped around the crochet hook. The main thing is, if you get it all, if you grab it and pull it to the wrong side, you're all good. So now I'm pulling it through, and this tail is on the wrong side of the work. So that's the first thing we should do. We should transfer everything to the wrong side of the work. So I have one tail sticking out here, so I'm gonna do it same thing again. So I'm go into that spot where the tail comes out, and then I grab it somehow and pull it to the wrong side of the work. So now the work looks pretty good on the right side, and we have to fix the wrong side. So I put the crochet hook aside because we won't need it anymore, and now we're gonna sew in each tail. It takes about a minute. I actually timed myself. It takes about a minute to take care of each tail. So set it aside a few minutes of your time, because you would need about a minute for each tail. But you know, it's totally worth it, because once we stitch it in, there is no way it could get out, and I will show you, we'll stretch the fabric afterwards, but for now we need to do it first, right? Before stitching it in, and you see I wove in tails in different directions to show you. So this one is diagonal, this one is horizontal, to show you that it doesn't really matter which way you're weaving in ends you used when you were hiding the tails. It doesn't matter at all, as long as you have that tail somehow in the fabric and you have that piece of tail sticking out. That's all we need. I mean, we don't need it, right? We want to fix it, but it doesn't matter which way of weaving in you used. before we stitch the tail to the fabric, we need to pull the fabric sideways or other ways, depending on what the project is, what kind of project it is, because usually the main reason why the tails get out is because they're too short for the fabric. So once you start wearing, the fabric stretches, and if the tail is too short for the stretch, then it just gets out. That's it. So to make sure it doesn't happen and the tail is long enough for the fabric to accommodate for the stretch, we'll stretch the fabric first. Once that is done, we are ready to start actually sewing. So take your sewing needle, thread the strand or the sewing thread into the sewing needle, and find the spot where the tail comes out. So for me, it's gonna be over here. See, I'm gonna fold the fabric so you see where it is, right? And then run the needle through the tail, along the tail, starting at the point that is about 2 centimeters, 1 inch away from that spot. So I'm gonna insert the needle here and then run it along the tail through the strand and get out in that spot where the tail gets out. So that's what we've got here. And then pull the yarn, the thread, but not all the way through. Pull it just enough to make sure the tail is hidden or almost hidden, like here. I don't want to hide it, I want you to see where it is. So that's what we do. Then make one stitch, doesn't really matter where, somewhere around one of the strands, and secure the yarn. So you go inside the loop and then pull it tight to secure. Okay, so now our thread is in the work, so we are not worried that it will get out of the work because we secured it already. And now it's time to get the tail. So take that tail. If it's too puffy like mine over here, twist it a bit so it's more like a strand of yarn and less like a tassel, and align it to the closest bump, to the bump of the closest stitch. If your wrong side, the wrong side of your work is more like stockinette, then align the tail with one of the strands. So just what's gonna happen, we're gonna stitch the tail to one of the strands, one of the stitches, right? So on the reverse stockinette, it's easier to do to the bump. On the stockinette stitch, it's easier to do to the stitch itself, to one leg of the stitch. So we are dealing with the reverse stockinette here. So I'm gonna attach this tail to this bump because it's gonna be the closest one to the tail. So I'm gonna twist the tail a bit and then align it with that bump right over here. And then we make 2 stitches. The first stitch is gonna be from the bottom of the tail, not all the way through the work. I'm actually just picking a few strands of that bump, of that stitch, and I get the needle out at about 2/3. So I basically go through the strand at about 2/3 of the thickness of that strand and pull the thread through. Then go again into the same spot where we went for the previous stitch and go all the way to the top of the yarn tail, like this. Pull it through. So that's our first stitch. Then we make the second stitch. That would be from the top of the yarn to about 2/3 of the yarn again, but in the other direction. So these 2 stitches are gonna overlap and we go out in the same spot, just like this. See, these 2 stitches now overlap, and that gives that security. This way the yarn tail won't get out even if we pull it really kind of aggressively, right? So it will stay there, which is great. And then make another stitch just to secure the yarn. Just go under that strand or under any other strand, doesn't really matter. Create a loop, go in there and pull it tight. That's it. Now the thread is secured and the tail is secured. Now we need to deal with this thread, and we go back the same way we came in here. So we go from the point where the tail is sticking out and is now stitched to the fabric, and we go out at about 2 centimeters 1 inch away from that spot, just like this, and pull it out. That's it. Our job is done. Now cut the strand, the thread, and trim the tail. So I'm gonna cut a bit. I'm not cutting very close to those stitches. I'm gonna leave a tiny tail over there. I'm gonna show you how big it is. See, that's how big it is. So it's tiny tail, but it's all secured, and now it won't get out of the work again. And even though I did it with the contrasting color yarn, it still doesn't show at all on the right side of the work. Now you can be confident that the tails will stay put no matter what. You can also use this technique to secure each tail right after you weave it in. This way you won't have any nasty surprises when you wash the project. To download this tutorial as a set of step-by-step photo instructions, go to my Patreon page. The link is in the description. Thank you for watching this video and have a wonderful week. I'll see you next Thursday.